You're on, Esha.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing? I guess I need to turn on the light to be less weird, but I guess the light okay, just ignore the light. I'll move it over or something weird, whatever's necessary. Well, welcome to our one more episode of Late Nights with Lenin. I think this is our third week of doing the Late Night with Lenin, and it seems like people like it more. Can you hear me? Okay, so where do we begin? Well, let's begin with Snopes, and I will explain how it's connected. Can you still see me now? No, it's too dark. Okay, so I'll put this. It's okay. Now it's better. Okay, great. Okay, now it won't blind me. Hi, W. Smith. Okay, so let's begin with Snopes. If you're wondering why Snopes is related to Lenin, well, let's first look at what Snopes fact-checked this week. I'm so sorry, Ghani Abdul said I misspelled Fee's last name. I probably did. I'll fix it after the stream. I can't fix it midstream. And I apologize. Okay. So now so let's pop up the Snopes fact check. Yeah, okay. So they said if you encounter this video of Biden that is prefaced with the caption, my butt Ben White, you may be predisposed to hear my butt Ben White in this clip. But is that what he's actually saying? Okay. So let's listen to the video of what he says.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to have to upload it again. It's not playing. Hold on.
Okay, no, don't worry. Okay, by the way, can we just show Nate Newman's a comment that says, thanks for putting me onto theory. So you're welcome. Theory is very important because liberals try to pretend that you are the child, and it's actually them who is the child, because they're like, what do you know that's practical? This is not how the way things work. And it's like, what the bleep do you know? So the difference between the left and the right is that the right is already in power and they're trying to maintain power, while the left is not in power and you are trying to get power. One is an easier task than the other. And because the right controls everything, all of the state, the media, the police, the schools, literally everything, you are basically David fighting against Goliath. And liberals have never actually fought against Goliath and won, and so they don't know what the bleep they're talking about. So you should ask them, like, oh, how do I know what you know what you're talking about? And they can't, other than, oh, this is the orthodoxy that some fascist taught me. And Dissident Rage said, the stream won't stay live. It keeps dropping. Is anyone else having the issue? Okay. If not, somebody. Well,
I haven't had it on my phone, which is on a Wi-Fi. So
okay, that's great. It's fine for everyone else. Okay. And Roxanne Devario said that thanks for glad to catch an episode. I'm glad you're here. So Dissident Rage asked, is Snopes doing brown? I don't know what is brownwashing. I don't know what brownwashing is.
yeah, I don't.
So
But I don't know.
I don't know what brownwashing is.
All right, do you want me to play the video?
Yeah, please play the video.
Okay.
What must be what? What must be what? What must be what?
All right, so that's the video.
Yeah, so it's clear that we know exactly what, I mean, it sounds like he is saying my butt's been wiped. So Snopes doing this like really bizarre fact checking where they're not actually checking facts. They are trying to do propaganda and denying reality. The reason why liberals should stop bleeping denying reality is because this makes the right wing and Tucker Carlson look like a brave truth teller when he says, I hear Joe Biden saying my butt's been wiped, and you hear this. Everyone hears this. But liberals think that you are okay, please put Janet, can you please just have to click on it on the right, just put mass casualties, president ass wiping shish is prime content for Snope. Exactly. Just click on his thing and that'll put it on the stream. Okay.
Wait, I don't, oh wait.
Yeah, just click on his name. Mass casualty 10:07 p.m.
Oh, mass casualty, okay.
Okay. So yeah, anyways, it's like, why are you doing this? And it's liberalism. They can't help themselves. The way liberals always default to is that they can you just put his comment on, please?
I'm trying to find which one you're talking about. I don't
okay, here. It's the 1107. The Prez ass wiping sheesh is prime content for Snopes.
Not seeing it.
Here, I'll send you a screenshot. Just put the screenshot up.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Just put the screenshot. Okay. Anyways, yeah. So it's like, yeah. They literally made this is how Tucker Carlson gets credentials and looks like brave truth tellers. Well, they look like stupid liars. But the thing is that they're all stupid liars. So. This is just like, this is the most irritating thing ever. And on top of that, Joe Biden is doing the Magnitsky on Cuba. So if you guys don't know what Magnitsky is, I'll check out our episode on the Magnitsky Act. What happened is that some billionaire who ended up sending us a cease and desist letter for running this episode, for interviewing the producer of the Magnitsky Act.
All right, now I finally got it. So that was
that's okay. That's what he said.
I don't know why I could not get it.
Don't worry about it. Just
see all the other comments. I just could not find the comment.
Okay, that's great. It's okay. Just okay. Let's go. Let's hide the comment now. Okay.
Okay.
Can you just also hide your screen, please?
Yeah.
Okay. And so yeah, they make themselves look like. And this is the worst thing, is because they're empowering the right wing. They make the right wing look credible. And none of this is necessary. And all they needed to do is ignore it. Okay, so what if he did say my butt is wiped to a reporter? It's senile. It's your fault. You have to have better minders to make sure he doesn't talk to reporters. That's it. Like, it's not a big deal. Send Kamala Harris instead of him. And don't let reporters into that area where he's free for all, allowed to talk. Get him like a zapper that zaps him when he tries to talk. Like, you can do something if you're one of his minders, like Ron Klein. Okay. Oh, okay. So on top of it, Biden announced that they're sanctioning individual police officers in the Cuban Revolutionary Guard. This is like the Magnitsky Act is where this billionaire who defrauded mentally disabled people in Russia, who ran away from Russia, and instead of facing charges for basically defrauding mentally disabled people, and then he used his money and power to create a global regime to harass every single person who tried to bring him to justice. So the prosecutor and things like that. But Bill Browder, he's 100% guilty. Oh, yeah. When we put up that podcast 2 years ago, he tried to send us a cease and desist and intimidate us. Like, that's like doing this podcast, I learned how petty rich people are. Like, why the bleep are you going to be wasting your time on a dumb podcast? I don't know. They're petty. They search their names and Googling, and they do this because money allows them to do this. So that's what Biden's been doing with Cuba. Oh, Pedro Castillo inaugurated, and he picked some good leftists in order to get a new constitution. But watch out for the basically the coup attempt. And today we have, speaking of Peru, we have Fiorella Isabel. She is the host of Convo Couch, and she's actually from Peru. So during the Peruvian elections, she actually went to Peru. And I do understand a lot of you think that she's problematic. I'm not going to disagree. She's a really, really nice person. But what happens is that when you are constantly bombarded by propaganda, not like over 10 million times, sometimes if you don't have the best detector that's the sharpest, it's hard to figure out whether or not this is BS or this is true. And sometimes it's easy to get swayed. By the way, the reason why people smear her is it's not okay. So if you're going to say that, oh, she supported a fascist, guess what? I can find you if you repeat establishment talking points, I can promise you that every single pro-establishment journalist and independent journalist in America has not only platformed fascists, but they've like praised actual Nazis. I kid you not. Like they've probably praised Adolf Hitler's best friend before. All of them, 100%. What they're upset about is, of course, that her critique is not conforming to State Department orthodoxy, and that's what they do. But if you're going to talk about the Red Wine Brown Alliance, oh yeah, definitely watch my video about the certain journalist who talked about the Red Brown Alliance while she was praising this man who supported Adolf Hitler. So I love you too, Connie. So with that, let's watch this. I'll be back at the end with questions. And also, I'll also talk about this random dude who was trying to troll me about Lenin and why he's wrong at the end. Exactly. Anyone who anyone who jerks off to NASA anyone who jerks off to anything about the U.S. supports fascists are everywhere. But like I said, and what better way is to help somebody get on the right track than for them to read Lenin? There is no other way. So not the right track, but the correct track. Okay, with that, we play. Today we have Fiorella. Is it Fiorella or Fiorella?
Fiorella.
Okay, Fiorella Isabel from Convo Couch today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining. I'm a big fan of Convo Couch. So what got you interested in starting that channel?
Wow. Yeah, I've come a long way. We started that channel in an activist perspective. We were both, my co-host and I were involved in the entertainment industry in LA. We saw a lot of poverty. We got involved with the Sanders campaign and then saw what happened after that and how just a whole movement was basically co-opted by the entire Democratic Party. And we went from, okay, maybe we can try to get what we can out of it and see if we can elect more socialist or leftist into the Democratic Party. And that obviously didn't work out. And so now I'm at the point where electoralism is not the way. I'm all about direct action. I think we need, to really stop relying on politicians completely. And I have been doing a lot of work in foreign policy, imperialism, elections, and just all around getting people out of poverty. There's so many events we cover locally as well as nationally and internationally. I went to Peru to look at their elections, and they elected Pedro Castillo, which is really great news for Peru. And I guess like the class issue really got to me. That's really what it was, just the wealth disparity. And it's only gotten worse in the 8 years that I've been in Los Angeles. There are tents everywhere. And now they're attempting to criminalize poverty by taking away these tents and removing them. So there's so many things that are going on right now, I think, that are that are just unprecedented, but also I'm really big on big tech. Like, I think technology is a form of crypto fascism in the way some of these corporations are coming in. And I think that also has to be addressed.
Well, okay, so I have many comments. The first thing is when you said you were done with electoralism, I'm like, you're ready for Lenin. Awesome. So welcome. And the second thing was I was very impressed by how you went to Peru because you saw so many bread tubers just BS about countries they don't know. And you actually went there, and I was amazed at how you were able to do that. So, of course, besides the financial thing, there's really no excuse for most people, especially if you're making millions of dollars like PYT, to not be in Peru covering the elections. So how was that experience? And is there anything that the Western media is hiding or not explaining about Peru that we need to know about?
Yeah, so that experience was unique because one of the reasons why my family immigrated to the United States from Peru is because of the battle between the dictatorship of Alberto Fujimori, who was this, global capitalist right winger, and he was trying to shut down this group called Shining Path or Sendero Luminoso, and they. In that sense, there was always that whole specter of communism, the fear of that versus a very, very right-wing type of neoliberal government. And so Peruvians who immigrated from that didn't see the geopolitical intricacies, like the effect of the CIA, the effect of Western imperialism, and as to how that, it caused the peasantry to rise up. And of course, for some of the things that happened were absolutely horrible. My family did live through it, but at the same time, you have to understand that. And as an adult, I understood that. But when I was growing up, I was told, communism is bad, it's terrible, and blah, blah, blah. And I was always like, but how can an ideology that's about, empowering workers be bad? And so I just started questioning all of that. So it was like full circle for me to go back during an election between Alberto Fujimori's daughter, Keiko Fujimori, and of course, a leftist who is a teacher of the peasantry. He comes from the rural, poor, indigenous areas of Peru. It was completely just amazing to see that, and amazing to see the Peruvian people rising up, because so much of the wealth of Peru goes out of the country. They have a rich country when it comes to resources, gold, copper, lithium in particular. And so for me, it was those things that I see that the United States has vested interest in lithium of Bolivia, in the natural resources of Peru. So it was extremely pivotal for Pedro Castillo to win. And of course, the fight isn't over. Of course, the OAS was always watching them. There are obviously other forces involved. And now there was a recent meeting with Evo Morales welcoming Evo Morales into Peru, where Vladimir Cerrón is one of the Peru Libres party leaders, was having dinner with him. And and to me, I just see a unity of the global South, because oftentimes when Western leftists describe their socialist utopia, they always talk about Denmark and Sweden and Scandinavia, when those countries aren't socialist at all. So it's to me, and the reason they are even so empowered is because of the exploitation of from the West into these societies. And so you see that socialism in the global South comes from a class mentality, a mentality of, not so much of the I guess like the symbolic things that the social issues that we focus on. Well, I'm not diminishing their importance to marginalized communities here. In Peru, it's like people don't have time to worry about that, because their immediate needs are, I need electricity, I need this, and so they are better. And I've noticed it's not just Peru, but in the global South in general, at fighting for workers' rights. And so we will never see a candidate like Pedro Castillo here, as long as we don't understand that we are our own impediment, I think, on the left. And just lastly, one of the things that they have ignored is the election system in Peru is extremely transparent, easy, fluid compared to our own. It's very much paper ballots, same day, one day, a few hours. And so that is not talked about. There's such a knee-jerk reaction of the left, the Western left, to just try to impose their duality of Democrat and Republican onto every other country, when that's not, you need to understand the indigenous aspect, the Catholicism in these countries, and the economic existence that they have existed on for forever, as well as the U.S., the boot of the U.S. Empire attempting to constantly involve themselves in their affairs.
100%. When you mentioned the Shining Path, the first thing I thought of was that it sounds exactly like Operation Gladio in Italy. They had this weird fake Marxist party that bombed random people. It sounds a lot like that. That's the first thought. The second thought is I'm from India, and I have not been to Peru, but I've been to many places in South America, and people don't understand. And I've been to other third world countries too. So people don't understand what exactly is a third world country. For example, poor people in third world countries are not sending their children to school. They're going to be working in mines and not learning how to they don't understand those kind of basics of deprivation. And the third of all is, of course, they don't understand how the imperialism works, because the US essentially ignored all the poor countries and got together a bunch of fascist countries together to say, hey, manufactured goods are going to be worth more than raw material, even though raw material uses more labor. And that means, and then we're going to use our currency. That means that no matter how hard you work, you're never going to catch up, because raw materials always cost more. And that's where there's the labor, that's where the exploitation is so much that Americans can't even comprehend it. And because Americans have never seen that kind of destitution, the having to sell your 12-year-old daughter so your 8-year-old daughter can get diabetes medication, whatever it is to prostitute, they can't even imagine it. So to them, if you show them a third world country, they're just going to get horrified by the third world country. But to me, you see a big difference between, say, Serbia, which has had a long socialist past, versus India. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And so there's the entire incomprehension is the what I call the commodity magic theory, where they actually don't understand how stuff is made.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. 100%. There's also the fact that we're not even a first world nation. We're like a fourth world nation, because a lot of the people in America lack basic resources. Even though we live in such a rich and industrialized country, a lot of people in America still lack these resources. It's obviously at a different level than people a lot of people in North America lack these resources. And it's different than at a level where Latin Americans lack electricity, and other things that we take for granted. And so I think that economic reality for them really pushes them to work naturally towards a more sort of socialist type of governance, especially if they're the communities that are indigenous, that constantly are at the end of the spectrum, which what was happening recently that echoed what was happening a long time ago during the late 70s and 80s, was that the peasantry in Peru was getting their land confiscated by the capitalist class and big business. And that's happening again. And so that's why you saw this support for people like Pedro Castillo. And you've seen it before for people like Evo Morales, because they may not be, the most wealthy or Harvard educated type of politician, but they understand the working class and what the vast majority of people need. And these people have been completely just forgotten for so long. And so it's just so interesting to see the criticisms coming from the West. Oh, this person isn't right there on LGBTQ issues. And, that could be a valid criticism, but who are Americans to really dictate how a politician should be? We have nobody near Evo Morales or Pedro Castillo in our Congress. Nobody even close.
Yeah.
So
okay. Well, I have so many things to say about this. But the thing is that there's the first issue of the U.S. doing enough coups, and Catholicism itself was not an indigenous religion. So
exactly.
When you put in there are thousands of different, that's an understatement by me saying thousands of different indigenous cultures that had a completely different view of sexuality that was forcibly erased from them. So you don't understand their history. And then third of all, what Pedro Castillo promised is a new constitution with an Evo Morales style constitution. And that means that it's not up to him. It's really up to the people, because with the Peruvian constitution, it was so democratic. They had different people can actually go find different sections. They're like, hey, this guy from say El Alto can be like, that section, I wrote it. And they had it they went down through the Constituents Assembly, and it was double approved. It came from the down up, and then they consolidated it, and then it went back down, and they had a referendum. So it was actually triple approved. So Americans can't even imagine something that democratic. So what Pedro Castillo personally feels about any issue might not even matter.
Exactly. That's something that's never pointed out. It's always let's just, this person isn't good enough for this. And it's well, you have to understand they have better democracy than we do. We don't have a democracy in this country, really. And so it's I think that's why it's so hard for other Americans, especially people who have never left the United States, to really understand how other countries work.
Exactly. And it's and they also don't understand how just even a little bit, okay, here in the US, to buy a city council member, I'm sorry, but it takes about $50,000. They're cheap. But then when you have the conversion rate and the forced poverty, they don't understand how easy it is to buy everyone in power in third world countries. So they actually, what they don't understand is how much the US interferes. And to them, when you tell them the truth, it's you sound like a conspiracy theorist. And it's no. I'm actually understating it. This is what the CIA admits to in public, is what I have to tell people. I remember doing this episode about Chagos, and it sounded insane that the CIA would gas people's puppies to death. That sounds like Cruella de Vil. I'm this is what they admit to. So God knows what else they've done. So there's that context that they're missing. And then it's just that. And then, of course, there's the lack of imagination of what I call what people do when they have unlimited power. If you're a colonized country and some white, they don't understand about the sex tourism, the fact that middle class white guys can go buy 8-year-old kids in poor countries. There's so much they don't understand. So, and it is one of the most frustrating things trying to explain another country to somebody who lacks imagination, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, and there's also, the fact that the space of independent media or YouTubers, RedTube, is heavily dominated by the white male, bourgeois. Basically, I like some of the people, right? But at the same time, it's so saturated with that white male perspective, and like female perspectives are rarely ever just like valued or like pushed as that. And it's not something that I pay attention, or that I pay attention to it, but I don't like focus on it, because you get so much backlash, like for even mentioning something like that, because now the tendency for some of these people is to say, oh, well, that's identity politics. No, identity politics is like Kamala Harris being like a good VP for Black people because she's Black, half Black. That's identity politics. This is like, no, there are actual real class issues. If you look at who really encompasses journalism, you'll definitely see a lot of class. The upper echelons of the class are represented more so in journalism than the working class. And journalism used to be a profession that was a working class profession. It was never a profession to be about elitism, and that's all it's become mostly now, even in leftist spaces. And so it's one of the reasons why I like speaking to women who do, podcasts or do media, because I think that perspective is so necessary, especially as an immigrant. Like, I wasn't born here. Of course, I came at a very young age, but like just having those cultural ties and understanding like that you are a product of imperialism, and understanding how that has directly affected everything that you've done, it's impossible to not be an anti-imperialist when you know all of this.
Yeah, I mean, there's like with India, India is like not as badly ruined as Peru, like it'll never be. Thank God for that. We have nukes, but but the thing is that I like India, like I can even visually see the British imperialism in that my uncles who grew up before independence, they are about a full foot shorter than my uncles who grew up after independence. Like it's like 5'4" versus 6'4". That's like the difference between 1947, which is the magic date, and that's what imperialism does. And we're like a decently well-off family, so it's way worse once you go down the ladder. So and in America they make it so that people don't understand imperialism because, I mean, like you don't want to know that you're a middle class and you can work at a Ford factory and get a TV because some child in Congo is mining your whatever you need in the TV tube.
Right. Because, well, yeah, I mean, imperialism is capitalism in its highest form, right? So like when you're looking at that, and you see people like if people who love capitalism and say they're anti-imperialist, it's almost like a contradiction. Because at the end of the day, it's like eventually the reason the United States is an empire, it's because they've extended capitalism to its no end, to where now it's conquering other nations. I mean, there's no separation, but to get people to understand that is difficult because it's so out of their reach. And it's the same way I feel like about, speech freedoms and all of that. People, it's such a big deal and it's so important, our ability to speak and to talk about the things that people are censoring, whether it's leftist ideals or whether it's, whatever it is. But the people just don't see it because their immediate reaction is to, wait a minute, like I need healthcare, I need food, I need this. And so that's why I'm a proponent of, giving people those things, because once you give people those things, then it's like, okay, well, then you're going to see that even with having all of that, our government is essentially an oligarchy, and you can't expect an oligarchy to really take care of you, or you can't trust the system. It's like they're still trying to work within the system, and the system is irreformable. And there's a huge line between those of us who understand the system is irreformable and those who want to continue trying to like patch it up, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with understanding what the US does abroad and how disgusting it is. Like, once you hear, I mean, there is no magical line that will ever stop them from doing it at home, really. Like, I've written about El Mozote, Doser, like just everything. Like sometimes I've gotten sick to my stomach. But what I realized is that they have no boundaries in what they're willing to engage in order to uphold the system. So while many people actually, this might be a Jenna, well, let's do the constitutional illusion piece because this is perfect segue to that. But they think that the rules that the elite lay down right now will also be the same if the people try to get more power, and they don't realize that, no, those rules will change and the death squads are coming here too. But
yeah. Okay. So constitutional illusions are what we call a political error when people believe in the existence of a normal, judicial, orderly, and legalized, in short, constitutional system, although it does not really exist. At first glance, it may appear that in Russia today, July 1917,
I love how Lenin actually takes the time to explain what today is, just so that he doesn't forget in the future. Like he's like a very misinterpretive proof in this way. Okay.
Yeah. That I was like not expecting that. Let's see.
In Russia today.
I think I was with
in line two. At first glance.
At first glance, wait.
You're in the second line. At first glance, it may appear that Russia today, July 1917.
When no constitution has yet been drafted, there can be no question of constitutional illusions arising, but it would be very wrong to think so. In reality, the essential characteristics of the present political situation in Russia is that an extremely large number of people entertain constitutional illusions. It is impossible to understand anything about the political situation in Russia today without appreciating this. Positively, no step can be taken towards a correct formulation of our tactical task in Russia today unless we above all concentrate on systematically and ruthlessly exposing constitutional illusions, revealing all their roots and reestablishing a proper political perspective.
Bingo. We have a constitution that's been around for far too long. And so I mean, if like this was right after the Tsar was forced to abdicate in like February. Okay, so they had a different calendar back then where they used the Julian or the Gregorian, which I can't remember which one's which. So in March or February, the Tsar was forced to, depending on which calendar you use, was forced to abdicate in 1917. And they put this like dude named Kerensky, who was like a total shit lib. And he was like so bad, like his entire thing was like trying to keep Russia inside of World War I. And he was so bad. Like the Western allies were planning on coupping him and putting in like some Juan Guaido type of character there. But thank God Lenin came in and stopped that. But so it's funny how in Russia back then, when there was no constitution and you had like 500, 800 years of the Tsar, you had constitutional illusions. So what hope do we have here?
Yeah. And also just like the point of, in order to move forward, you have to undo those illusions because they're like as long as people continue believing, and let's say, for example, in the two-party duopoly, the illusion of a duopoly, because it's an illusion, we're not going to be able to go anywhere because there's like, for instance, you have a DSA types and all these groups that try to co-opt actual socialism and all of these theories and to kind of make them into something it's not, but something that they can fit into capitalism and to pretty much reforming something that shouldn't be reformed. So as long as we keep doing that, we're not going to move forward.
Absolutely. And they've been doing that since time immemorial. Like even Lenin complained about that. Like they like how everyone turns Marx into a liberal. But go on. Yeah.
Let us take 3 ideas which are most typical of the current constitutional illusions and look into them carefully. Idea number 1 is that our country is about to have a constituent assembly. Therefore, everything going on now is temporary, transitory, inessential, and non-decisive, and everything will soon be revised and firmly regulated by the Constituent Assembly. Idea number 2 is that certain parties, such as the Socialist Revolutionaries or the Mensheviks or their elite alliance, command an obvious and undisputed majority among the people or in the most influential institutions, such as the Soviets. Therefore, the will of these parties and institutions, like the will of the majority of the people in general, cannot be ignored and even less violated. In Republican, democratic, and revolutionary Russia. Idea number 3 is that a certain measure, such as closing down Pravda, was not legalized either by the provisional government or by the Soviets. Therefore, it was only a passing phase, a chance occurrence, which cannot at all be regarded as something decisive.
This to me seems very relevant for Peru, because like this is the stage where all the ghouls are trying to go in to make sure that the constituent assembly there is kind of ghoulish. So hopefully Bolivia somehow figured out how to do it. So, and I guess Venezuela too. So inshallah.
No, I agree. Let us look into each of these ideas. The first provisional government promised to convene a constituent assembly. It considered that its main job was to prepare the country for a constituent assembly. The second provisional government fixed September 30 for convening a constituent assembly. The third provisional government, after July 4th, solemnly reaffirmed that date. Nevertheless, the chances are 100 to 1 against the constituent assembly being convened on that date. And even if it is, the chances are again 100 to 1 that it will be as impotent and useless as was the first Duma until a second revolution triumphs in Russia. To appreciate this, you only have to detach yourself for a moment from the present hubbub of empty phrases, promises, and petty doings, which fuddles your thinking and takes a look at the main thing, at what determines everything in public life, the class struggle.
Yeah, this is the main thing, is that there's so much, like in America, the hubbub, there's always a hubbub that'll always fuddle people's thinking. Like they've overload, like, I don't know what to, like, it seems like an overload of hubbub and you can't ever stop it. Like, do you ever get that feeling?
Yeah, well, it's just the distractions, right? Like the distractions from the class struggle like is what I see here.
The petty doings, like that's all that America is. Like, it's like, okay.
Like the propaganda, the politicians that are there to co-opt, once again, these movements, people like the Squad, who are just, they're not at all these revolutionaries, and they have managed to just make people believe in that, when it's basically just rebranding. At the end of the day, they're not doing anything about the class struggle, because it's not going to come from them. It's got to come from people.
Exactly.
It is clear that the bourgeoisie in Russia have become very closely tied up with the landowners. This is shown by the whole press, the elections, the entire policy of the Cadet Party and the parties to the right of it, and by speeches made at congresses of interested persons. The bourgeoisie understand perfectly that the petty bourgeois, socialist revolutionary, and the quote left Menshevik windbags cannot understand, namely, that private ownership, land ownership in Russia cannot be abolished, and that this without compensation, except by carrying through a gigantic economic revolution, by bringing the banks under popular control, by nationalizing the syndicates, and adopting the most ruthless revolutionary measures against capital. The bourgeoisie.
This is exactly, okay, so in Russia, back then, the abolishing private ownership had a different meaning, because like they more or less had slaves. But he realized, like, if you're going to have to abolish landlords, which is, you're going to also have to, like, it's kind of like pulling the tree out from the root. You can't just like cut off the tree. And here I see so many people thinking about like welfare reform, Medicare for all, whatever, but they don't understand the root beneath it. And so they're just like looking at the tree and not uprooting. And to me, the root are the capital.
Right. So that's one of my issues with, while I am supportive of policies like healthcare for all, because I see people dying and I understand those, they need that. I don't expect the current government to implement that in the right way. And so when I say that, they're like, oh, you're against Medicare for all. It's like, no, I don't try. I'm telling you, the government is going to fail in doing that, because this system is not set up for that. This system has literally gone and overthrown democratically elected governments all over the world, is completely owned by corporations and big pharma. And you think that the same system is going to give you the salvation that you think that this type of healthcare will be. It's not going to work. I'm saying once you've achieved that is, but this empire has to fall, so to speak. You cannot, like, it's hard because I understand, like, yes, I understand I am for something like that. I just don't think the current system is going to give you that right now. And so that's my critique of that.
A few episodes ago, Lenin addressed just this about lesser evilism. It's hilarious. So I'm going to send you that episode at the end. So next time somebody says that, tell them to screw off and then like show them this Lenin quote. And because Lenin basically says that when bourgeoisie do reforms, it'll always be like backhand. Like there's a nice quote. And it's so much harder for them to argue with Lenin than it is with me or you. Number two, yes. What they don't realize is that the system was made by genocidal slave owners, and like it's a strong system because it's been around for like 300 years or more around that time. It's not, you can't expect a system designed for genocidal slave owners to do more slavery and genocide to suddenly pop out justice. That's stupid.
Exactly. I think the bourgeoisie understand that perfectly. At the same time, however, they must know, see, and feel that the vast majority of peasants in Russia will now be much more to the left than Chernov, as well as declaring for confiscation of land estates.
Wait, hold on. I'm a little lost. Give me 1 second. Okay, so it is clear that the bourgeoisie, yes, that's exactly where we are. Sorry.
Okay, and for the bourgeoisie know better than we do, both as to how many partial concessions were made by Chernov, say from May 6th to July 2nd, over delaying and curtailing the various peasant demands, and as to how much effort it took the right socialist revolutionaries. Chernov, believe it or not, is regarded as center man by the socialist revolutionaries at the Peasant Congress and on the executive committee of the All Russia Congress of Peasants' deputies to reassure the peasants and feed them on promises. I think that's just related to talking to just giving the people, dangling a carrot in front of people, right?
Exactly.
Continuing to say, we're gonna do this, we're gonna help you, we're gonna give you Medicare for all. 30 years go by, nothing changes.
Like AOC's like 35-year plan for Medicare for all. I'm like, wait a minute, Lenin overthrew the entire czar in less time because he started in 1901 and by 1917, boom. And you want to do a 35-year plan for a house? That's ridiculous. Go on. Yeah.
I mean, that's bullshit. Okay, I think you're
at the big bourgeoisie differ.
The big bourgeoisie differ from the petty bourgeois in that they have learned from their economic and political experience the conditions under which order, i.e. keeping down the people, can be preserved under capitalism. The bourgeoisie are businessmen, people who make the big commercial transactions and are accustomed to getting down every political matters in a strictly business-like manner. They take the bull by the horns rather than putting their trust in words. The Constituent Assembly in Russia today will yield a majority to peasants who are more to the left than the socialist revolutionaries. The bourgeoisies know this and therefore are bound to put up a tremendous resistance to an early convocation. With a Constituent Assembly convened, it will be impossible or exceedingly difficult to carry on the imperialist war in the spirit of the secret treaties concluded by Nicholas II, or to defend the landed estates or the payment of compensation for them. The war will not wait. The class struggle will not wait. This was evident enough even in the brief span from February 20th to April 21st. From the very beginning of the revolution, there have been two views on the Constituent Assembly. The socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks, completely swayed by constitutional illusions, viewed the matter with the credulity of the petty bourgeois who will not hear of the class struggle. The Constituent Assembly has been proclaimed there will be a Constituent Assembly, and that's all there is to it. Everything else is to the devil's making. Meanwhile, the Bolsheviks said only the growing strength and authority of the Soviets can guarantee the convocation and success of the Constituent Assembly. The Mensheviks and socialist revolutionaries laid emphasis on the act of law, the proclamation, the promise, the declaration to call a Constituent Assembly. The Bolsheviks laid emphasis on the class struggle. If the Soviets were to win, the Constituent Assembly would be certain to meet. If not, there would be no such certainty.
This is exactly the difference. I know it's kind of funny because I believe were you also included on the weird red, yellow, whatever color alliance?
Red, brown.
Okay.
Alliance, yes. Welcome, fellow red, brown.
Yeah, but it's really funny because those people had gotten me suspended for like 24 hours on Twitter the night before for saying that the Soviets did not kill enough Nazis. And like, if that's the one thing they can't make it stick on me is the Red Brown Alliance, because like I've multiple times, like there's only one thing I've ever suggested you do to Nazis, but so I made that video. But what is funny is that a lot of people are like, oh, exactly this, like just because some random politician said, hey, I'm going to introduce Medicare for all. Do they understand the process? Do they understand the healthcare lobby, the global pharmaceutical lobby, whatever other ghoul lobbies there are on top of that? No, they don't, because to them, it's all about this little stupid legal document where you introduce something to Congress. But the thing is that they don't realize you don't even have to bring it to committee if you do, or like without Pelosi's consent, like it doesn't even have to go to committee. Like you can just let it die.
Yeah.
Gone.
The people aren't in power either. So like anything that gets passed is not going to have the people's voice. So therefore, it's not going to be good enough, which is why I say, this is like a first step. I like people rising up to have direct actions, but it doesn't end with like pushing a bill or getting it passed. That's not what we're about here.
It's a fundamental change. Like basically what's happened in Bolivia or Peru, for lack of a better analogy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is exactly what happened. The bourgeoisie have all along been waging, both in the open and undercover, a continuous and relentless struggle against calling a constituent assembly. The struggle was prompted by a desire to delay its convocation until after the war. It expressed itself in the fact that several times they postponed the date of convocation. When after June 18th, or more than a month after the formation of the coalition cabinet, the convocation date was at last set, a Moscow bourgeoisie paper declared this had been done under the pressure of the Bolshevik propaganda. Pravda has published an exact quotation from that paper. After July 4th, when the servility and timidity of the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks had led to the victory of the counter-revolution, a brief but highly significant phrase, the impossibly early convocation of a constituent assembly, slipped into rec. And on July 16th, an item appeared in Volya, Naroda and Roshkaya Volya, saying that the cadets insisted on postponing the convocation of the Constituent Assembly under the pretext that it was impossible to convene it at such short notice, and adding that Menshevik Tresteli, a lackey of the counter-revolution, had consented to its postponement until November 20th.
Okay, this is, the cadets actually stands for the Constitutional Democratic Party. And the funny thing is they literally do everything our Democratic Party does. You just have to remove the constitutional part. It's hilarious. But yeah, this sounds exactly like what our Democrat party does. Like they're like, oh yeah, you can't expect Medicare for all to happen instantly with a magic wand. And I'm like, you're the congressperson. You have that power.
Right. Exactly. And they said, undoubtedly, the item slipped in against the will of the bourgeoisie, who cannot benefit from such revelations, but murder will out. The counter-revolutionaries, letting themselves go after July 4th, blurted out the truth. The very first seizure of power by the counter-revolutionary bourgeoisie after July 4th was immediately followed by a very serious measure against calling a constituent assembly. That is a fact, and that fact reveals the utter futility of constitutional illusions. Unless a new revolution takes place in Russia, unless the power of the counter-revolutionary bourgeoisie, primarily the cadets, is overthrown, and unless the people withdraw their trust from the socialist, revolutionary, and Menshevik parties compromising with the bourgeoisie, the Constituent Assembly will either never meet or else will be just a Frankfurt talking shop. An impotent and worthless assembly.
Hold on. So for people who don't know what the Frankfurt talking shop is, what happened is that in 1848, like German peasants did not want to have a king anymore. But then what they did is they said, okay, in Frankfurt, we're going to have a constitution and constitution. So they did draft a constitution, but it left the king in place and didn't change anything. But then it did allow the king to amass a huge army. So that's what he means by Frankfurt illusions or Frankfurt chop talk or whatever. Okay, go on.
Yeah, an impotent and worthless assembly of petty bourgeois people frightened to death by the war and the prospect of the bourgeoisie boycotting the government, and helplessly torn between frantic efforts to rule without the bourgeoisie and the fear of getting along with them. I mean, this is where we're at right now. These people don't understand power. If you continue giving life to this illusion of a duopoly, and trying to work within it, like, oh, well, we have to like do something to get, Nina Turner or whoever else in office because that's going to change everything. No, it's not. And the more you continue doing this, we will never have anything new because you're perpetuating the system in its current form.
And on top of that, your district, because the U.S. is in the imperial core, it's so the reason why I finally discovered this thanks to Lenin. The reason why Americans are what foreigners call really dumb is that the skill they lack is dialectical materialism. So they get easily swayed by nonsense that's fed into them because they don't know how to kind of see the world as it is, as opposed to what the bourgeoisie want you to see the world as. So it's going to take a long time for Americans to understand the system. So if you're going to distract them every 2 years with we're going to have to do some stupid primary, blah, 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 you're not going to give them the time it takes to understand the long game because they're always playing the short game. And
exactly.
And so, and a lot of people really don't understand power. They don't understand that if the police, the laws are only enforced as much as you have a police holding a gun to it. If they say no, regardless of what law you pass, you're done.
Yeah, and the police are the peons of the national police state. So of the government. So the government isn't going to ever defund the police because the government needs the police to implement their laws against the working class because the laws don't apply to the bourgeoisie. And so that's part of where people don't understand. It's not like I'm anti-defund the police. It's they're only they're so minuscule. They're a tool. You have to tackle the state agencies and the people in power in order for that to happen. The politicians aren't just going to pass a law that leaves them unprotected to a mass uprising. They're not ever going to do that. The Constituent Assembly issue is subordinate to that of the course and outcome of the class struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Some time ago, Rabotchia Gazeta blurted out the remark that the Constituent Assembly would be a convention. This is an example of the empty, wretched, and contemptible bragging of our Menshevik lackeys or of the counter-revolutionary bourgeoisie. If it is not to be a Frankfurt talking shop or a First Duma, if it is to be a convention, it must have the courage, the capacity, and the strength to strike merciless blows at the counter-revolutionaries instead of compromising with them. Absolutely. For this purpose, power must be in the hands of the most advanced, most determined, and most revolutionary class of today. For this purpose, that class must be supported by the whole mass of the urban and rural poor, the semi-proletarians. For this purpose, the counter-revolutionary bourgeoisie, i.e. primarily the cadets and the high-ranking army officers, must be dealt with mercilessly. These are the class, the material conditions necessary for a convention. You have only to list these conditions in a precise and clear way to understand the stupidity of the Rabotchia Gazeta's bragging and the utter foolishness of the constitutional illusions of the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks regarding the Constituent Assembly in Russia today.
Exactly. And the only thing I would change is instead of he says cadets and high-ranking army officers, I'm just going to change that to the Democratic Party and corporations. Otherwise, right. Otherwise everything still stays the same because our army officers don't have that much power, as you know what I mean? Yeah.
And just a question for you, when they say mercilessly, what do you interpret that as? Do you interpret that as a bloody revolution or?
None of
Like,
the
you know,
above. I interpret it as you don't compromise. So an example of a compromise would be, oh, okay, you bourgeoisie, you get to bring in 2 people into the country. You're like, screw you, go away. We're going to do it our way.
Yeah.
That's what not allowing for a counter revolution, like understanding that they'll always be trying a counter revolution and never allowing for that to take hold is what I interpret it as. And doing whatever's necessary.
Okay, and so the second part, when lashing the petty bourgeois social democrats of 1848, Marx was particularly severe in his condemnation of their unrestrained use of empty phrases about the people and the majority of the people in general. It is well to recall this in examining the second idea and analyzing constitutional illusions about a majority.
Yep.
Exactly. For the majority in the state to really decide, definite conditions are required, one of which is the firm establishment of a political system, a form of state power, making it possible to decide matters by a majority and guaranteeing the translation of this possibility into reality. That is one thing.
I mean, literally, yes. This, Janet, let's put this up just so that people can get this, because, yeah, you can't just like, I don't know why, but Americans interpret some like random vote as the will of the majority. And it's like, no, it's not. The state is not literally. James Madison has said that the purpose of our state is to protect those with property from those without. So the electoral system is not meant to express the will of the majority in this current state. Like, they don't seem to understand that you need an apparatus that kind of, it's like a megaphone that takes the voice of the majority and like, I don't know, like amplifies it into everyone. It's an analogy, but I don't know what else to say. Like, you can't do it. And there isn't, like, you can't measure whether or not people support socialism or whatever based on whether or not they voted for Hillary Clinton. Like, it's just,
yeah,
they're not correlated. And because the state apparatus is not actually meant to do this, like, you don't know what most people feel, actually.
Well, yeah. Well, also, most people are propagandized and miseducated. So they're not, like, they don't even know what socialism is. They have the wrong idea as to what it is. And so you can't measure that based on.
Yeah, exactly. And all these people are like, well, this measure is unpopular because, and I'm like, now you rigged the election and our state apparatus is not meant to take the voice of the majority. So go away is what I want to say, but go on.
Exactly. I think I said that is one thing, right? That is one thing. Another is that the class composition of the majority and the interrelation of class inside and outside, it should enable it to draw the chariot of state concertedly and effectively. Every Marxist knows that these two concrete conditions play a decisive part in the question of a popular majority and the direction of state affairs in line with the will of the majority. And yet no political literature of the socialists, revolutionaries, and Mensheviks and their political conduct, even more so, betray a complete lack of understanding of these conditions. If political power in the state is in the hands of a class whose interests coincide with those of the majority, the state can be governed truly in line with the will of the majority. But if the political power is in the hands of a class whose interests diverge from those of the majority, any form of majority rule is bound to become deception or suppression of the majority. Every bourgeoisie,
Let me explain. Like, a lot of people don't know this, but like in the Cold War, like, you know how they always like controlled about like Russians or USSR or Soviets or whatever. But then when you went to the Korean War, there were only Koreans, no Russians. When you went to the Vietnam War, there were only Vietnamese, no Koreans. I mean, no, there were Koreans, long story, but no Russians. Well,
right.
The reason is because, like, if you read the history of the Korean War, what you'll realize is that the U.S. like made thousands of landmines over 200 miles to literally prevent the will of the majority from convocating. Like, they don't even realize like how undemocratic the U.S. is, and literally, like, they have done wars to, like, once you understand the history of the Korean War, you'll understand that, I mean, like, everyone wanted one Korea, and in fact, they had to bring U.S. troops over because they tried to use Korean troops and they tried to defect to the north. And that's when they had the big massacre. I can't remember which one because there's so many of them. but they had to like massacre all the troops and then bring in American troops as to stop the will of the majority. But so yes, so he's so right about this, and it's so once you kind of understand that how the U.S. works so hard to stop, how capitalism and democracy can never fit, like everything makes sense. But whatever. Sorry for the side rant.
No, and and it's like, and this is why it doesn't work to say that, oh, we'll just have the will of the majority now, because now we don't have control. We don't live in a system that is represented by us at all. So even if you do something on the surface to say, oh, we're going to allow a majority of people to vote, you don't know that that's even real, because they're controlling every other mechanism.
Oh, yeah.
So you can't have it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because the reason why the U.S. keeps obsessing over elections in third world countries is because I just interviewed somebody who who covers Myanmar. It's just so that they can do a coup in a much easier way with the color revolution than to like actually do the Korean War. So
right.
I mean, people don't understand. I mean, it just makes sense once you understand it, but then you sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist. And
exactly. Every bourgeoisie republic provides hundreds and thousands of examples of this kind. In Russia, the bourgeoisie ruled both the economic and political life. Their interests, particularly during the imperialist war, violently conflict with the interests of the majority. Hence, from a materialist and Marxist, and not from a formally juridical point of view, we must expose this conflict and combat bourgeoisie deception of the people. Absolutely. Our socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks, on the contrary, have fully demonstrated and proved that their true role is to be an instrument of the bourgeoisie for deceiving the people, the majority, to be the vehicle of that deception and contribute to it. However sincere individual socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks may be, their fundamental political ideas, that it is possible to break free of the imperialist war and gain peace without annexations and indemnities, without the dictatorship of the proletariat and the triumph of socialism, and that it is possible to secure the transfer of land to the people without compensation and establish control over production in the people's interests without the same condition. These fundamental political and, of course, economic ideas of the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks are, in practice, nothing but petty bourgeois self-deception or deception of the masses, the majority, by the bourgeoisie, which is the same thing. Absolutely. I mean, that's
exactly like AOC. They're like, oh, however sincere, like the mention, and that's exactly right. Like, I don't doubt AOC or Rashida Tlaib's sincerity. It's just that they're not set up to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt their sincerity, some of their sincerity, but I mean, you're right. Absolutely. That's not their role. Their role is to continue managing the narrative for the current status quo. Yeah. Right.
Exactly.
And that is our first and main amendment to the majority issue as understood by the.
Wait. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, I lost track. Go ahead.
No problem. As understood by the petty bourgeois Democrats, socialists, and the Louis Blanc types, socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks. What, in fact, is the value of the majority when a majority is in itself only a formal thing, and when materially, in actual fact, the majority is a majority of the parties through which the bourgeoisie deceives the majority?
It's literally what Americans always mean when they say majority. It's the majority of parties through which the bourgeoisie deceive the actual people.
Exactly.
Okay.
And of course, and this leads us to our second amendment, to the second of the above mentioned fundamental conditions. This deception can only be properly understood by ascertaining its class roots and class meaning. This is not self-deception, not to put it bluntly, a swindle, but an illusory idea arising from the economic situation in which a class finds itself. The petty bourgeois is in such an economic position, the conditions of his life are such that he cannot help deceiving himself. He involuntarily and inevitably gravitates 1 minute towards the bourgeoisie, the next towards the proletariat. It is economically impossible for him to pursue an independent life. Yeah, exactly. You could say that about people who call themselves socialists, but are extremely well off. And while they understand that there is this struggle happening, they're not really living in it. So they can easily remove themselves. And that's why you'll see these elitist journalists always say, oh, but you have to be nicer to the squad. You have to, because they still aren't really there with you when it comes to really overthrowing the system as a whole.
Exactly. Like yesterday, Emma Vigilant made her like stupid comment, which really irritated me. So I released that video. But it's like, yeah, what do you know about? She's like, that's bad strategy. Read a book. It's like, have you read a book? And what do you know about strategy? How many revolutions have you had? Oh, 0. Okay, shut up. Like, it's like I hate the way they think that they know something, and it's like, shut up.
Yeah. And that's part of the class thing. His past draws him towards the bourgeoisie, his future towards the proletariat. His better judgment gravitates towards the latter, his prejudice, to use a familiar expression of Marx, towards the former.
Bingo. That's exactly the prejudice. Yeah, that's exactly it. Like the prejudice, like exactly. Go ahead.
No, yeah, it's just funny. For the majority of the people to become an actual majority in state administrations, the actual servant of the interests of the majority and the actual protector of its rights, and so on, a certain class condition is required, namely that the majority of the petty bourgeois should join forces with the revolutionary proletariat, at least at the decisive moment and in the decisive place. Without this, a majority is mere fiction, which may prevail for a while, may glitter and shine, make noise and reap laurels, but it is absolutely and inevitably doomed to failure nonetheless. This, incidentally, was where the majority of the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks came to grief, as the Russian Revolution showed in July 1917. Further, a revolution differs from the normal situation in the state precisely because controversial issues of state life are decided by the direct class and the popular struggle to the point of armed struggle. It cannot be otherwise when the masses are free and armed. This fundamental fact implies that in time of revolution, it is not enough to ascertain the will of the majority. You must prove to be stronger at the decisive moment, and in the decisive place, you must win. Beginning with the peasant war in the Middle Ages in Germany and throughout all the big revolutionary movements and epochs, including 1848, 1871, and 1905, we have seen innumerable examples of the better organized, more politically conscious, and better armed minority forcing its will upon the majority and defeating it.
Bingo.
Friedrich Engels particularly stressed the lesson to be drawn from experience, a lesson which to some degree is common to the peasant revolt of the 16th century and to the revolution of 1848 in Germany, namely this unity of action and lack of centralization on the part of the oppressed owing to their petty bourgeois status in life. Examining the matter from this point of view, we come to the same conclusion, namely that a simple majority of the petty bourgeois masses does not and cannot decide anything. For the disunited millions of rural petty proprietors can only acquire organization, political consciousness and action, and the centralization of action, which is indispensable for victory when they are led either by the bourgeoisie or by the proletariat.
Yeah, it's literally this. Like this is where you get the socialism or barbarism. Like those middle managers of capitalism, like need one, and it has to be the proletariat if you want it to be better for the people. Right,
exactly. It cannot be led by somebody that is not of that class. Yeah. In the long run, we know that the problems of social life are resolved by the class struggle in its bitterest and fiercest form, civil war. In this war, as in any other war, a fact well known and in principle not disputed by anyone, it is economics that decide. It is quite typical and significant that the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks, while not denying this in principle and while realizing perfectly the capitalist character of Russia today, they are not faced the truth soberly. They are afraid to admit the truth that every capitalist country, including Russia, is basically divided into three main forces: the bourgeoisie, the petty bourgeois, and the proletariat. The first and third are spoken of and recognized by all. Yet the second, which is really in the numerical majority, nobody cares to appraise soberly, neither from the economic, political, nor military point of view. Truth does not flatter. That is why the socialist revolutionary and Menshevik shrink from recognizing themselves. How would you equate that to now? I mean, the petty bourgeois versus
now things have changed a little bit. So you don't really have a petty bourgeoisie because 100 years have passed since then. But what you have is like an imperial middle manager. So they are working class, but they're so like things have been, thanks to all the slave labor from third world countries here in the first world countries, you have those middlemen and PMC types that just are there. And they're the ones who are upholding everything. So I'd say that instead of the petty bourgeoisie, I'd call it the, I don't know, imperial labor, non-class conscious proletariat. I don't know what else, whatever is in the US, non-class conscious proletariat, deluded proletariat. Well, they will uphold the US system across the globe because they're just as they're just as comfortable. Like they don't really, it's just like they're right above the line and they don't realize that they're just like that to go here. Yeah. But they're willing to, they think that if they work hard or whatever, it'll keep them in the line. But no. Yeah. So it's the same task, but it's just a slightly different problem.
It seems like that's the majority of uneducated Americans too, like politically
that's exactly
uneducated.
Why they are there. I mean, it's on purpose because otherwise, how else do you get people to hold up, like do the worst sins known to man, like mass murder people in Asia, like bomb everything, if you don't like, you know what I mean? Keep them comfortable enough that they'll never see who they're bombing and always blindly trust the framework they're given. So we have that exact same situation, but it's in a different format.
Exactly. Well, when I was just beginning this article, the closing down of Pravda was merely an incident, one that had not yet been legalized by the government. But now, after July 16th, the government has formally closed Pravda down. If viewed historically and as a whole throughout the process of its preparation and realization, this measure casts a remarkably bright light on the nature of the Constitution in Russia and so on, the danger of constitutional illusions. It is known that the Cadet Party, headed by Milyukov and the newspaper Rek, has been demanding repressive measures against the Bolsheviks ever since April. This demand for repression, presented in various forms, from the statesmen's like articles in Rek to Milyukov's repeated cries, arrest them, Lenin and other Bolsheviks, has been one of the major components, if not the major component, of the cadet political program in the revolution. The Cadet Party has been systematically, relentlessly, and continuously demanding repressive measures against the Bolsheviks long before Aleninsky and co. in June and July invented and fabricated the fully slanderous charge that the Bolsheviks were German spies or were receiving German money, and long before the equally slanderous charge running counter to generally known facts and published documents of armed uprisings or of rebellion.
Before Russiagate, there was, this is really funny because before Russiagate, there was Germanygate. So even in America, because of World War I, they were sure that all the anarchists and socialists were secretly paid by Germany to stop the US from entering World War I. So, but then it's now, because Lenin succeeded, now suddenly everyone's a secret Russian agent.
Right. Right. Nothing's changed. Since this demand has now been met, what are we to think of the honesty and intelligence of those who forget or pretend to forget the true class and party origin of this demand? How on earth can we help describing as crude falsification or incredible political stupidity the futile efforts of the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks to make up? They believe the occasion, which presented itself on July 4th for the repressive measures against the Bolsheviks, was an accident or an isolated incident. There must be surely a limit to the distortion of indisputable historical facts. That's the thing. Like, whenever they do something wrong, it's never intentional. It's always like, oh, it was just, disorganized, a distorter, carelessness. It was never intentional. And that's something you see the establishment constantly say, oh, no, we didn't mean to do that.
It's not, but the system is designed so that if there's carelessness, like, for example, the coin flip with the Bernie Hillary thing, how come all the coin, even though the coin's technically supposed to go 50-50, why did all the coin flips go on Hillary's side?
Exactly.
Go ahead.
So, okay, you have only to compare the movement of April 20th and 21st with that of July 3rd through 4th to realize immediately that they are alike in character. Both contain such objective facts as a spontaneous popular outbursts of discontent, impatience, and indignation. The provocative shots from the right, the killings of Nevsky, the slanderous outcries from the bourgeoisie, particularly the cadets, to the effect that it was the Lenin people who fired the shots on Nevsky, the extreme aggravation and exacerbation of the struggle between the workers and the bourgeoisie, the utter confusion of the petty bourgeois parties, the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks, and the tremendous range of vacillation in their policy and in their approach to the issue of state power generally, June 9th through 10th and June 18th give us just the same class picture in a different form. The course of events is as clear as can be. It shows growing popular discontent, impatience and indignation, and an increasing aggravation of the struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, particularly for influence over the petty bourgeois masses. Linked with this are two very important historical developments which have made the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks dependent on the counter-revolutionary cadets. These developments are, first, the formation of on May 6th of a coalition cabinet in which the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks turned out to be the hangers-on of the bourgeoisie, getting themselves more and more into a tangle by making deals and agreements with the latter, rendering them thousands of services, delaying the most essential revolutionary measures time and again. And secondly, the offensive at the front. The offensive inevitably implied the resumption of the imperialist war, a vast increase in the influence, weight, and role of the imperialist bourgeoisie, the most widespread chauvinism among the people, and last but not least, the transfer of power, the first military power and then state power generally, to the counter-revolutionary high-ranking army officers. This was the course of historical events between April 20th and 21 and July 3rd through the 4th, deepened and sharpened class antagonisms, and which after July 4th enabled the counter-revolutionary bourgeoisie to accomplish what on April 20th to 21 had stood out very clearly as their program and tactics, their immediate aim and their clean methods, which were to lead to the achievement of that aim.
And that was stopping the Constituent Assembly. So even in the US, like you'll see, notice how, like, anytime the proletariat, like, they've actually learned from Russia in that they don't even let you have that much. Like, anytime like, you know how Obama stepped in when it looked like Bernie was going to win, because they know better than to, like, even give you crumbs.
Yeah. Right. And people have gotten so used to getting nothing that they're accepting smaller and smaller and smaller crumbs.
Exactly. That's the entire trick. Yeah.
Okay. So nothing could be more pointless historically, more pitiful theoretically, or more ridiculous practically than the Philistine whining echoed incidentally by El Martov as well over July 4th to the effect that the Bolsheviks contrived to defeat themselves, that this defeat came from their own adventurism, and so on and so forth. All this whining, all these arguments to the effort that we should not have participated in the attempt to lend a peaceful and organized character to the perfectly legitimate popular discontent and indignation are either sheer apostasy, if coming from Bolsheviks, or the usual expression of the usual cowed and confused state of the petty bourgeois. In actual fact, the movement of July 3rd through 4th grew out of the movement of April 20th to 21 after as inevitably as summer follows spring. It was the imperative duty of the proletarian party to remain with the masses and try to lend as peaceful and organized a character as possible to their justified action rather than stand aside and wash its hands like Pontius Pilate. On the pedantic plea that the masses were not organized down to the last man and that their movement sometimes went to excess, as though there had been no excesses on April 20th and 21st, as though there had ever in history been a serious popular movement free of excesses. This is something I just want to say. Every time that people organize any sort of direct action or any sort of attempt that is independent of politicians, there is always somebody maligning it and somebody trying to say, well, they did this wrong, so let's throw out the whole thing. And it just happened. I saw with the Medicare for All March, they were like, oh, some guy got in there. That was obviously an inside job and whatever.
It was seriously a sabotage. The Nazi was seriously a sabotage job because they hid his name, and his first name was Matt. Everyone in America is named Matt. And they took advantage of the fact that like the Medicare for All organizers wanted somebody who was a normal human being, who was ordinary. So yeah. And just because you have some, not like, they got rid of the Nazi after they figured out he was a Nazi, but it basically, they knew it because that's how you give the press something to report on, to smear these
this attempt. Yeah, the guy was never
Pavlov's dog. They act like Pavlov's dog. Literally, like, you know how the TYT people, and then they gave them the saliva or the bell.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was never, the guy was never booked anyway. Like, it was just like a picture was posted. And they always try to say, you know, oh, you're so disorganized. You people that are outside of the party, you're so disorganized. You never get anything done. It's that whole thing that they're pushing on people. I've lost my place. Are we the defeat?
Sorry. Hold on. The defeat of the Bolsheviks after July 4th.
Okay, the defeat of the Bolsheviks after July 4th followed the historical inevitability from the whole preceding course of events, because April 20th through the 21st, the petty bourgeois masses and their leaders, the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks, were not yet tied by the offensive and had not yet got themselves into a tangle by their deals with the bourgeoisie in the coalition cabinet, whereas by July 4th, they had become so tied and entangled, they could not but stoop to cooperation in repressive measures and slander and butchery with the counter-revolutionary cadets.
Hold on. This reminds me exactly of like the AOC bloc, in that early on, they were able to kind of stay with the masses because they had not been to tangle their deals with the bourgeoisie basically in the Democratic Party. And now that's why they have to stoop to cooperation, like I said. Go on.
Yeah, exactly. On July 4th, the socialist revolutionaries and the Mensheviks slid for good into the cesspool of counter-revolution. They had been steadily sliding towards it throughout May and June due to their role in the coalition cabinet and their approval of the policy of offensive. We may appear to have digressed from our subject, the closing down of Pravda, to a historical estimation of the events of July 4th, but this only appears so, for the one cannot be understood without the other. We have seen that if we look into the matter of the interconnection of events. The closing down of Pravda and the arrest and the other forms of persecution of the Bolsheviks are nothing but the realization of the long-standing program of the counter-revolutionaries, the cadets in particular. It would now be highly instructive to see who specifically carried out this program and by what means. Let us have a look at the facts. On July the 2nd through the 3rd, the movement was growing. The people were seething with indignation at government inaction, the high cost of living, economic dislocation, and the offensive. The cadets withdrew, playing a giveaway game and presenting an ultimatum to the socialist revolutionary and Mensheviks, leaving them tied to power but lacking power to pay for the people's defeat and indignation. On July 2nd through the 3rd, the Bolsheviks were trying to restrain the masses from action. This has been acknowledged even by an eyewitness from Dielo Naroda, who reported on what took place in the Grenadier Regiment on July 2nd. On the evening of July 3rd, the movement overflowed its banks, and the Bolsheviks drew up an appeal stressing that the movement must be peaceable and organized. On July 4th, provocative shots from the right increased the number of victims of the firing on both sides. It should be pointed that the executive committee's promise to investigate the incidents, to issue bulletins twice a day, et cetera, has remained an empty promise. The socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks did nothing whatsoever. They didn't even publish a complete list of the dead on both sides. On the night of July 4th, the Bolsheviks drew up an appeal to stop the action, and Pravda printed it at that same night. But the same night, firstly, counter-revolutionary troops began to arrive in Petrograd, apparently upon the summons or with the consent of the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks of their Soviets, a delicate point regarding which, of course, the strictest silence is maintained even now when every bit of need for secrecy is past. Secondly, that same night, military cadets and such like, clearly acting upon instructions from Polovtsev, commanding, and from the general staff, began raids on the Bolsheviks. On the night of July 4th through the 5th, Pravda's office was raided. On July 5th and 6th, its printer's Trude was wrecked. A worker named Voinov was murdered in broad daylight for carrying Listok Pravda from the printer's house. House searches and arrests were made among the Bolsheviks, and the revolutionary regiments were disarmed. Who started it all? Not the government or the Soviet, but the counter-revolutionary military gang grouped around the general staff and acting in the name of the counterintelligence service, circulating the lies of Petroversev and Alinsky in order to stir up the army and so on. The government is absent. So are the Soviets. They are trembling for their own fate as they receive message after message that the Cossacks may come and smash them up. The Black Hundred and cadet press, which led the hounding of the Bolsheviks, is beginning to hound the Soviets. The socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks have bound themselves hand and foot by their entire policy. Being bound, they called or tolerated the calling of counter-revolutionary troops in Petrograd, and that bound them even more. They have sunk to the very bottom of the foul counter-revolutionary cesspool. They cravenly dismissed their own commission appointed to investigate the case of the Bolsheviks. They basely betrayed the Bolsheviks to the counter-revolutionaries. They abjectly participated in the funeral procession of the Cossacks who were killed, and so kissed the hand of the counter-revolutionaries.
Okay, by the way, the Cossacks are like death squad, so I don't think of them as a KKK. Okay, go on.
They are completely bound. They are at the bottom of the cesspool. They tried this, that, and the other. They hand Kerensky the cabinet. They go to Canossa, to the cadets. They organize a Zemsky Sobor, or a coronation of the counter-revolutionary government in Moscow. Kerensky dismisses Polotsev, but nothing comes of all those efforts. They in no way change the actual state of affairs. Kerensky dismisses Polotsev, but at the same time gives shape and legality to Polotev's measures and to his policy. He closes down Pravda. He introduces the capital punishment for soldiers.
Hold on. He's introducing capital punishment for his own soldiers because they are abandoning him to join the Bolsheviks. Okay, go on.
He bans meetings at the front. He continues to arrest Bolsheviks, even Kolontai, and in accordance with Leninsky's programs. The nature of the constitution in Russia is coming out with striking clarity. The offensive at its front and coalition with the cadets in the rear have cast the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks into the cesspool of counter-revolution. In reality, state power is passing into the hands of counter-revolutionaries, the military gang, Kerensky, and the government of Tsereteli and Chernov are only a screen for it. They are compelled to legalize its measures, actions, and policies post factum. The haggling going on between the cadets and Kerensky, Tsereteli, and Chernov is of secondary importance, if not entirely unimportant. Whether the cadets win this haggling or whether Tsereteli and Chernov hold out alone will have no effect on the actual state of affairs. The fundamental, the main and decisive fact is that the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks have swung over to the counter-revolutionaries, a swing forced by the policy they have been pursuing since May 6th. The cycle of party development is complete. The socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks have slid steadily downwards from their expression of confidence in Kerensky on February 28th to May 6th, which bound them to the counter-revolutionaries, and then to July 5th when they touched rock bottom.
This kind of reminds me of the time that AOC in January 4th voted for Nancy Pelosi. But come on, anyways.
I'm just going to finish this last sentence. A new period is coming in. The victory of the counter-revolutionaries is making the people disappointed with the socialist, revolutionary, and Menshevik parties and is paving the way for the masses to adopt a policy of support for the revolutionary proletariat. You have seen the squad, how people had faith in them from the beginning.
1 million times.
And then people have lost. I remember going after AOC a few years ago and people were like, oh my God, you're just mean. You want to destroy, you never want to win. It's like, no, like this is happening. And to now we're her own people who are like really big fans of her, which you shouldn't be fanatical about a politician anyway, but that they're like, wait a minute, you're not pushing this, you're not doing that. And, and that is a shift that I'm seeing, I think, where I think that's a good thing for us, but it also just, I think people need like direction as to where to go to next, because otherwise you're just going to keep trying to bring somebody else in to change the system rather than change, like completely just be done with the system as a whole, as its current state, right?
Okay, yeah. For the first red flag for me was maybe when she met with the Bolivian fascists. That and people criticize me for like yelling at her for meeting with the Bolivian fascists, but you don't need to meet with the Bolivian fascists. I'm sorry.
Right.
And it was real, like that guy literally on his Facebook page talked about how he wanted to burn the C word alive, and he used racial slurs for indigenous people. So you don't have to meet, like, that was my first red flag. And but yeah, a lot of people think that because she does not have power, she's like capitulating because she wants to hold the seat, whatever bullshit theory they have in their mind. That's not how it works, because I always tell people, if you don't have the balls to stand up to Pelosi, there's no way you're going to have the balls when things get worse and you get like a Goebbels or a Hitler or whatever, right? You're going to capitulate. If you're going to capitulate to power when the consequences are just like, oh, you're going to lose your congressional seat, are you really going to capitulate or not capitulate when you're going to lose your life? No. So it's funny because Lenin trolls this guy named Karl Kautsky. And yes, like basically he was the head of the German Social Democratic Party while Lenin was the head of the Russian Social Democratic Party. And what you realize is that Karl Kautsky's wife dies in Auschwitz, and Lenin was 100% right. And Karl Kautsky was like even after selling out the Bolsheviks for the bourgeoisie, his wife died in Auschwitz. It's like in a concentration camp, like everything went downhill. So if that is not a cautionary tale about opportunism, I don't know what is, because like the worst thing is that these people won't have the courage to stand up, but when things are now and they get worse and worse and worse, they're going to have even less courage. And but it's also what they don't understand is, yes, it is self-destructive. It's not going to benefit these people, like these petty bourgeoisie, like the America's equivalent of the Mensheviks, and at all. They're going to get screwed by it, but it's a suicide trap, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like when AOC was trying to voted for Pelosi, and then one of the more establishment types held out their vote. It was kind of like
I forgot about that. Who was it?
Yeah, I forget who it was, but it was like, oh, well, she's got to keep her seat and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's not how power works. Power, it's like, and even for you as a proletariat, as a civilian, if you're going to demand something from a politician, the time to demand it is before they're into power, not after. This is why the whole push Biden left thing and push these politicians doesn't work, because you don't have power over them at that point. They already are sitting inside. Like when you have power is before that, right? And people need to understand that.
Yeah, for me, it's like pushing Biden left is about as ridiculous as like pushing ISIS left. You're not going to do that. Yet people seriously consider this, and it's like, what? They don't care what you think. You can protest all you want. They don't care. There's nothing that changes. And yeah, exactly. With power, it's either you use it or you lose it if it's not done at the right moment.
100%. It's crazy how all of this relates so much over 100 years after.
I know. That's because that's capitalism. I guess nothing changed. As Biden said, nothing and that's the only campaign promise he's ever kept is nothing fundamentally will change.
Exactly. 100%.
Well, how do people find you? What time do you broadcast on YouTube? And can you give us those details?
Yeah, for sure. So I am Fiorella Isabel on Twitter. It's Fiorella_IM is my tag. We're also on the Convo Couch YouTube, on Rockfin as well. It's a cryptocurrency platform that's there. And then you can find us also on Twitter at the Convo Couch. We usually go Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at around 12:30. And we do interviews.
12:30 Pacific?
Pacific. Sorry, 12:30 Pacific.
3:30
and we
Eastern?
do 3:30 Eastern. And then we do like interviews and shows like pre-recorded or release it on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but mostly, yeah. So we try to go about 5 times a week. And my co-host has a special show called To Hell and Back, where they're doing a deep dive on the opioid crisis in America. And so they do that on Thursdays at 6 Pacific time.
9 Eastern.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming, and I loved having you on, and we should do this again some other time shortly.
Absolutely.
Hey everyone, how are you guys feeling? I hope it was informative. So let's get to the very first question somebody had. Janet gave it to me, and it was from a couch. Do I have to read Lenin to find out how to get rid of the two-party system? I don't know if you have to, but let's look at the statistics of successful revolutions around history. So historically speaking, there have been absolutely zero revolutions without Lenin, and all 100% of the revolutions have been with Lenin. So you don't have to, but I have yet to see a case where somebody's been successful in appending any existing system for a more egalitarian system without Lenin. So we'll just have to see. So then the next question was from President Jesus or President Jesus. I feel so stupid for getting caught up in the Democratic primary. Don't. Okay, so let me explain what the Democratic primaries are great for. The first one is that you can, if you canvass with the Democratic Party, you get access to all their data. So you know everybody's name, phone numbers, and their addresses. So then you can copy that down on your own spreadsheet, and then you can mail them Marxist literature. So it's a great way. And then if you go canvassing, I didn't actually talk to them about Bernie per se. I said, hey, how are you doing? And I was like a extra ear, if that makes sense. So when I've canvassed in about I think I actually canvassed in every state until the COVID crisis. So basically I'd ask people, how are you doing? What's up? What are your problems? And they'd tell me what their problems were. And then I would just have a conversation with them. And so it's a great way to make relationships. If you're canvassing to get votes, it's not going to work. You have to canvass to make new friends or have relationships with new people that you wouldn't meet. And if you listen to their problems, and you actually think about it and have a normal conversation and build a relationship, they'll listen to your solution even. So that's the second thing. The third thing is that so those are the two things that the bourgeoisie elections are useful. The third thing is, of course, you kind of want to see, how do I explain it? So the Democratic primary, even though you can't really expect anything it's not, how do I explain it? Okay, so it's kind of like how Lenin spoke about the all-Russian newspaper. More than the newspaper, the ability to secretly distribute something, like it didn't even matter what, like if it was like even like a little post-it, little note card, the idea is having that infrastructure that you can distribute all over Russia. That helps a lot, like that, because in order to logistically distribute that, you need to have enough people who you have relationships with that you can trust, blah, and so on. And so bourgeoisie elections can be useful for logistical purposes. Think of it as a dry run or something like that. So there are lots of uses, and so don't feel and the other one is understanding, showing people the constitutional illusions. Like you guys would never ever 10 years ago, half of you would have ever believed me about the press just like outright lying about just literally everything. But you now understand how the New York Times is an organ of class rule, and they literally lie about everything. I mean, a lot of you would like it. If a lot, it depends. I guess it depends on how you like, whether or not you went through the Iraq wars or you're too young or whatever. But it helps expose the constitutional illusions for the people. So the idea is, wait a minute, Bernie's like that much compared to, say, I'm just gonna make up Maduro or Miguel Diaz Canel. Like, he's like that much. But then look at how much they put up that fight. So it will expose a lot of things that it's like a debugger in the system, is what I would say. So don't feel bad. It's okay to get caught up in the primaries once or twice, but just don't repeatedly do it. Just, you have to I mean, you should participate in the canvassing for strategic reasons. Like, there are different things that you can use the elections for, but don't believe that the elections itself, like, anyone who's capable of, it's kind of like the Groucho Marx club, where he's like, I don't want to be part of a club that would include people like me. It's the same thing. Anyone who's capable of being elected to Congress in a system created by genocidal slave owners is definitely not going to be a Lenin. Because a system created by genocidal slave owners makes like, they rig the system to make sure that you can't elect a non-genocidal, non-slave owner person. It's just the way it is. So those are the very good reasons. Okay. So Nadia Yvette Chambers said, vote for Lenin as a write-in candidate for the Democratic primary. Why? Just like, if you don't believe voting is going to be useful in your district, just don't do it. Like, why waste your time? So let's see. Hold on. Let me see if there's any other questions. Oh yeah. Mr. Piece of Work asked how Lenin did it. What happened is that they would print the newspapers abroad because the Tsar had access to they had to have physical printing presses, which were kind of hard to smuggle in, and the Tsar would smash it. So it was much easier to just print them abroad, and then they got whatever was equivalent of the UPS drivers from Tsarist Russia, who were very underpaid, overworked, to like secretly distribute it. And then but it's in the other republics, like in Georgia and Azerbaijan, they were able to smuggle in printing presses from Turkey, from the Ottoman Empire. And so that's how they ended up doing it. We're lucky in that we can just like put crap on the internet. The main thing is getting Lenin. See, when you distribute a newspaper to people, like Lenin would charge like, I don't know, 5 kopecks, which is like 5 pennies or whatever. 5 pennies, a dime. No, a nickel. Why do they call it a dime? I should figure that out later. If somebody knows why 10 cents is called a dime, let me know. And I'm getting distracted. Okay, so he exactly, based on like how many subscriptions he had, he knew how many people were reading it. Oh, they also taught people how to read before giving them the newspaper. So it was a much harder challenge, in my opinion, than anything we even have to imagine, because everyone can technically read. Okay. Neil Sanger asked recommendations by Stalin. Explain. If you're wondering what Stalin did, okay, so Lenin was in charge of the All Russia newspaper, as in he was the head of all of the newspapers. Stalin was the head of the Georgian Social Democratic Party, and so he worked on a Georgian newspaper. Thank you. Dime comes from the French word tenth or teeth. Okay, I did not know that. Okay. So then there's this this troll that I'm going to answer. So from Twitter, Janet, if you don't mind, can you please show his tweet? Okay. He said that the strategy to overthrow the Tsar was to be snuck into the country by Germans long after the Tsar is overthrown. Come on, I said, don't be this dumb brainwashed person on imperial propaganda. Come and listen to Late Nights with Lenin within exactly 20 minutes. And then he said, oh, come on, you can do better than that. It's fine listening to Lenin, Marx, and the whole gang, but there is no need to give him credit for what he didn't do. There's enough glory for all. That's nonsense. Let me explain why. Okay, so I've explained exactly why in today. Like today, I was on macro and cheese, and I talked about the Russian Revolution. But let me explain what happened. So without the Bolsheviks, okay. So in let's see, where do we start? After World War I started, okay. If you're a soldier doing World War I against Germans, you need a constant supply of bullets to shoot people, food, drink, bullets, weapons. And guess where you make the weapons? At the weapons factories. Oh my God. You know what the Bolsheviks did? They had 40,000 people join in on a blockade to the weapons factories. So then they sabotaged the railway. They literally rerouted weapons, like peasants in Russia rerouted railways. Like, you know how hard it is to reroute a railway to like make the Tsar's troops go in circles? Like they physically took railroads and went boom, 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 and then the train, it was like comical but funny, and then these like railroads would end, like these trains would end up in the Ottoman Empire and they'd all get captured, and it was very hard work. So then it's kind of funny because right before the Tsar okay, so the British and the French needed Russia to be supplying them with weapons and soldiers on the Eastern Front. And otherwise, like the idea was to squeeze Germany and then rob Turkey, as Lenin says. And so now if basically this side is not getting weapons and stuff, the first thing the imperialists will do will be like, oh my God, okay, we can replace the Tsar and put another puppet because this guy is literally our inbred cousin, and we don't actually care which inbred cousin we have in power in Russia, as long as he's one of our inbred cousins, is what the British thought. And so that's why the Tsar abdicated. So to not give the Bolsheviks and to not give Lenin credit is like basically really stupid, because without the Bolsheviks actually doing that, all the strikes where they had over 40,000 different strikes. And they had massive sabotage. Without that, the Tsar would not have abdicated, not without the Bolsheviks. Okay. As for whether or not Lenin should get credit for overthrowing another inbred cousin of the Tsar or whatever, yes, of course he should. So the rumor, of course, is that the rumor is that, of course, Lenin was secretly supported by the Germans. No, they had to actually, this is really a hilarious story, actually. So if by Germans we mean communists who spoke the language of German, yes. He was in Switzerland, and they actually ended up, Lenin was like, okay, I need to go back to Russia. And so they smuggled him on a train. And it's really funny because Lenin was supposed to be in like some sort of, when the Bolsheviks smuggled him, like he was supposed to be in some kind of like a back carriage, like, and out of view and keep a low profile because he was kind of illegal. And then apparently some lady said something wrong on the train. So Lenin came out to argue with this lady who said something wrong on the train for a while. And then like the lady looked at him really suspiciously because he was arguing with some random lady who said something wrong on the train. And then thankfully she got, and the Bolsheviks didn't know what to do because it's not like they could like grab Lenin to stop him from arguing with some lady who said something wrong. But he did for like, it went on for like almost an hour. And then thankfully she got off on Poland. And then the Bolsheviks are like, okay, Lenin can't help himself from arguing. So then they had a babysitter who sit with him to stop him from arguing with other people who were wrong on the train. So it was a pretty extensive thing to smuggle him. Yes, Lenin's, oh my God, Lenin is always arguing with people who's wrong all the time, like wasting time. Yes, we don't have trains because actually it's kind of weird because Hitler's anti-communist plan also involved the Volkswagen, and he did not like trains either because trains connect you with others. So if you're working as a proletariat in Bombay, India, for example, everyone has a set of train friends that they go with his that they go with him with each other. Like people know their train. Like I remember my uncle for his wedding once was like, "Oh yeah, I have some train friends I need to invite," and those were people he went on the train with. So yes. Ooh, okay, Neil. I don't. Max Blumenthal probably does not. No, I don't know. Sure, I can ask him to be a guest on Late Nights with Lenin. Sure. So he can read a piece, but I don't know if he knows enough to talk independently about Lenin. But like I said, I can invite him. No, thank you so much, Danny. And so, our congresspersons beg, yes, 100% performative, because you know what? It's not like this eviction moratorium was a surprise when Trump put it up. It was not a surprise. Because it had an expiry date. It had an expiry date, so they knew. So there's nothing that would stop them from, say, introducing this bill in January and making Instagram streams about it instead of making weird, like, conspiracy theories about random people at some grocery store in Washington. But so, yeah, there's like literally nothing that stopped them from doing that. So it's 100% performative. They, like in January, you know what? They could have done a ruckus for the 6 months and made tweets every single day and did Instagram streams and asked their millions of whatever to come out to protest or whatever is needed, but they chose not to. So yeah, it is 100% performative. Okay, so now who's ever says there's nothing low-key about how US is aligned with Nazis? I mean, seriously, nothing low-key. And the worst is that the US aligned with Nazis after the war and after seeing the concentration camps and after seeing babies killed by getting smashed in the head with rocks and after children were hung for meat hooks that they saw. So yeah, I mean, it's despicable. Okay. So now, yeah, I can invite Ben Norton too, and we can see. And okay, so it's okay. Danny Knapp says it seems like congresspersons should be able to make phone calls, arrange meetings. They have They have real power on the steps. Begging is what people without power do. Absolutely. They are refusing to use their power because what it is whenever they say it's practical, let's translate it to it is not practical for me to advance my career doing this move. So they have a choice. They can totally get gerrymandered out and get kicked of their committee seats and become a one-term congressperson and get marginalized, made fun of in the press, and have right-wing that job stalk them, and all sorts of other things, if they stood up for the people. But they are choosing to be opportunistic and thinking about their careers. Of course, if you ask them, they will say it's some secret deep strategy that's like a 35-year plan to stop eviction moratoriums or something like that. But in reality, if AOC can't even figure out that showing up in public does not actually do a coup, because you have to kind of, that's like not, you can't actually do a coup by just showing up in public. That's like utterly delusional. And it is utterly delusional. So the fact that she seriously thinks that shows that she lacks dialectical materialism. Anyone who lacks dialectical materialism is not going to be able to do real long-term change. And you definitely don't do real long-term change by not being honest with the people. Actually, we're going to read that piece about honesty that Lenin talks about next week. Okay. So, no, what happens is that they will turn into Karl Kautsky. Karl Kautsky betrayed the Second International, and you know what he got out of it? Absolutely bleeping nothing. His wife died in Auschwitz. So he betrayed all his country to these fuckers and got nothing personally out of it. So yeah, like that's not very strategic, but what can we do? Okay. So President Jesus said, did she actually say a 35-year plan? No, she said that by the time her 4-year-old niece is 35, she wants to be able to have Medicare for all by then, which is ridiculous because Lenin did a revolution in 17 years. Okay. The irony of, Lenin was the first one who wrote the piece called Our Revolution. Actually, let's read that too. Okay. That was Lenin that was plagiarizing Lenin. I'll take one of those 5-year plan. America can do okay, remember you're on the imperial core, you get all the commodities. And so literally the president just needs to go boom, 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 degree. And then like you just take away the bank account. You just need to change some numbers on some bank accounts and then change one line of code in the Medicare processing system from age 65 to 0. So you can do it like in 1 week. 5 years is a little too much. Okay. Let's see. In other countries, it's not that easy. For example, if you're in, I just make up a third world country, whatever third world country in the Burma, Myanmar. Okay. The thing is that they don't actually have physical enough doctors to be able to go to every village in order for everyone to get universal health care immediately. So for them, there is a logistical problem. They need to get enough doctors. They need to build hospitals. They need to do that. So in US, there's nothing. US has every single infrastructure. It's just that you just need to get rid of, you just need to and then you need to send in your military to stop the death squads from pharmaceutical companies from hiring death squads. But it can be done like this, but they're refusing. Arlene Everest said general strike. I am very suspicious of people who who talk about general strikes when they have not read Lenin, and they still think that showing up in public will lead to a change in government. That's not how it works. So, as Lenin says, if you're going to have a general strike, you need to show that you are logistically okay. The important thing about general strikes is that it is a projection or a show of power. So you are implicitly threatening the government and saying, hey, hypothetically, if these people had guns, we would organize an army and overthrow you fuckers. So that's what the general strike is. And a lot of Americans think that if you just show up in public, like it with signs, it works, but that's not it. And before you can even do, it's really, really, really hard work to get people to show up to things. So before you can even do Lenin even agrees, you need to have a lot of little strikes to show that you can logistically do it. And then once you have practice with a lot of little strikes, maybe then you can do a general strike. But before you do a general strike, why are you doing a general strike? How does it inconvenience the bourgeoisie? In what way are they not getting, are they not going to get whatever they need in order to be profitable or comfortable or not annoyed? So you have to think about all those things. And it's not like a magic pill or a magic wand that gets you what you want. So the general strike needs to have a purpose. And also strikes back in the day when it was a logistical thing. Because you needed people to do the factory things and they would sabotage it, and then you couldn't, it wasn't like then it would take weeks to figure out where the sabotage was, and then this guy was losing profits and he was freaking out. So but the same things won't happen because we've outsourced so much production and the ships are still like going and whatnot. Oh, by the way, Margaret Thatcher did this thing about how long a country can survive without who? You know who's the most important person? The garbage collector. Okay. I think we need to camp en masse to block. Yes, I agree. Yes. Yes, we do. But what this needs to be done in a way that everybody's cries are heard. So we need to figure out how are people who are going to get evicted. Like, actually, it's funny because in New Jersey, I've tweeted about this in Historically before, but in New Jersey, in New Jersey, believe it or not, in when was it crash? 1920 something, they actually beat up cops and stopped an old lady from being evicted. Okay. Yes, solidarity strikes are illegal because of Harry Truman. Yes. You definitely need to know how to figure out how to eat, how to grow plants, how to figure out which mushrooms. Okay. I think capitalism is covert fascism. No. Fascism is. Please read my article, Economy of Evil. But fascism happens when bourgeoisie democracy can no longer protect the capitalists. Then they're like, okay, we don't like these rules that we made for ourselves. We're going to change these rules. And so Mussolini and Hitler were both put into power by no, you need mushrooms for protein. They're a very good source of protein. In the wild, you need to figure out which one's not poisonous and which one is, and which one. So because they are good, easy, healthy source of proteins. They're full of, yeah. So you have to figure, but I don't know how to do it. And yeah, I'm really not one of the person who to ask. Okay. Capital fascism is, as Michael Parenti says, fascism is the final solution to the class struggle. So what's going to happen is that when you automate a lot of things, and so under capitalism, you need a lot of surplus labor, as in people without jobs who are willing to work for pennies, because that's how they keep the wages low. But if you have too many people without jobs who are willing to work for pennies, what's going to happen is that they're going to have a lot of free time to organize things and realize that, hey, what the bleep are those capitalists doing? We don't need them anymore. Let's get rid of them. And then they're going to overthrow you. So the fascism is a great way to like exterminate a good portion of whatever population you don't need when you automate some of production. And it's kind of funny because the way the Judeo-Bolshevik thing, they purged both Jews and Bolsheviks. So they got an ethnic thingy. Like they were able to get an, and then they were also able to just like, they were arbitrarily able to like, it also gave the state the power to purge anyone they wanted because they could just have to label them communist and boom, they're gone. So that's basically the function of fascism. Fascism is capitalist forcing squares. Yes, exactly. That's what fascism is. It is capitalism on steroids. Don't believe me? Check out the Nuremberg trials. Albert Speer says that the Third Reich was just another branch of IG Farben Industries. So, and he was their economics minister. Okay. So, do we have any other questions? I hope you guys please listen to my impromptu streams when I get mad. And let's see, do I have anything else to talk about? Did I promise to talk about? I think I did promise to answer a question, but I can't remember what. Let me just give me one more second. Oh, I know. What was it? It doesn't even matter. Okay. Oh yeah. I know, I remember. Okay. Somebody asked me about whether or not they're going to be cooing Pedro Castillo, and the answer is sí. Claro que sí. Absolutamente sí. Absolutamente sí. Por supuesto. Sí. Okay. It means of course, yes. So what can we do? The first thing is fighting again. The best thing you can do is every time they have regime change propaganda against Pedro Castillo, for your right-wing stupid Facebook relatives, just take a screenshot, edit it, and show them why this is stupid, and post it on your Facebook or whatever thing you use to talk to your stupid right-wing relatives. Because if everyone speaks to their stupid right-wing relatives, then we'll be able to. That helps a lot. The second thing is, of course, that is the first step. Not allowing. The second step is, of course, talking to your stupid anarch friends. If they're like, he's being authoritarian, remind them that Fujimori forcibly pulled out people's uteruses without their consent and without anesthesia, and nothing's more authoritarian than that, and tell them to go bleep themselves. And you should also remember the difference between what is a counter-revolutionary and what is a yes. Mr. Piece of Work said we need to distract the imperialists here. Yes, make them scared. Make sure that they can't actually do whatever they want to do in Peru. Make sure that they know that you care. Right, exactly. Dissident Rate says, I'm an anarchist because my stepdad Jeff told me to go to bed at 9 on the yes. I know. There's actually an anarchist, I'm not going to mention its name, but there's an anarchist who keeps talking about how authoritarian bedtimes are, and it's always when a lot of the okay, Janet's an anarchist, I know. She's a good anarchist, but a lot of anarchists are just teenagers who haven't if you haven't grown out of your anarchist phase. I mean, you can be a practical anarchist, but if you do not support Cuba, you are a narc. If you're gonna call it you need to have that much dialectical materialism to support Cuba. There's no excuse not to support Cuba. Okay. That's all I say. That's a great test of checking to see if they're an narc. I need to do my proper Chomsky rant, but there's I don't even know where to start on my anti-Chomsky rant. Because there's a lot to rant about against Chomsky. Yeah, and there's no excuse to being an anarchist at age 90 or 100 or whatever age he is. Okay, let me try. Chomsky. I can't do it right now, but Chomsky has this really boring vocal fry voice. Yo vivía en Perú por mucho tiempo y Pedro Castillo será bien para la gente del Perú. Sí. Is Marquis Lafayette a person worth knowing about? Let me Google and figure out, because I don't know who that is. Okay. I don't. Is he? Is okay. I literally don't know who he is. So let me get back to you. Is Chomsky still okay? Chomsky's always been an annoying liberal. Like, he is the worst annoying liberal ever. So, like, for example, he said real liberalism real liberalism is when you like, he Dave Rubin has a better idea of what real liberalism is. Okay. So he just kind of is so wrong often. So what he can do is, when it's too late and it's 20 years later and the CIA has declassified all the documents, he can talk about all the horrors in explicit detail in the most boring voice. But let me give you the best analysis of what the difference between a Chomsky and a Parenti is. Like I said, Chomsky was like, oh my God, there are these like Russians with nuclear backpacks. In 1992, he was like, there are these Russians with nuclear backpacks going to Serbia, and NATO needs to do something magical in Yugoslavia. Michael Parenti in 1992 had this lecture where he starts out with, Yugoslavia was based on an idea that the South Slavs did not need to be a slave anymore. If they just got together and united, they too can be free. And then 10 minutes later, when you hear about the destruction, like, you're crying, like, he makes you cry. And then you start feeling patriotic for Yugoslavia. And then you're like, wait a minute. Why am I feeling patriotic for a country I've never been to and that has not existed in 30 years? What's going on? And that's the difference between Chomsky and Parenti. So, 2001, Chomsky will tell you about how NATO put uranium and bombed the people in Serbia, and they have cancer, and they can't afford lollipops because of what NATO did. But 2001 is too late. You should have done that in 1992, which is what Parenti did. And Parenti will make you cry for Yugoslavia in 1992. Okay. Mr. Piece of Work said his manufacturing consent is all you need to know about him. No, because he is the second author in manufacturing consent. The primary author is Edward Hernan, a communist. So that's a little bit of a manufacturing consent too. Nadia said, for a while, the fall of the USSR convinced me that a state was doomed to capital encirclement. Yes, a state is doomed to capital encirclement, but the USSR lasted for 70 years. The Paris Commune lasted for 2 weeks. The Catalonian anarchists lasted for 2 years. So without a state, you're not going to even last more than 2 weeks. And there's still China. And without the USSR, there would be no China or the DPRK or Cuba. Or India even, or any independent. So the fact that all these countries had a better, like everyone who's not American or Western Europe thanks the USSR for existing, because, I mean, I would not be here. None of us would. So that's all I'm going to say. Zinn was very good. He was very historically factual and kept his opinions to a minimum. So he taught you about history through the lens of people. Sometimes he may have had bad political ideas, but it doesn't even matter. But I do love the way he said, you can't be neutral on a moving train. And yeah, that's right. That's a really great way to describe hegemony. I remember Parenti chewing out Chomsky about Yugoslavia and Chomsky pretended that he was always against intervention. That is, yes, I've tweeted this out. There is a Chomsky interview with Phil Donahue where he really conspiracy theorizes about Russians with nuclear backpacks. Actually, let me, let's do a impromptu stream sometime later. If you want anything useful that is attached to, To Kill a Nation is a great book. Chomsky argued that Luxemburg thought that Lenin was being an intellectual chauvinist in his organization of the Bolsheviks. Okay, who cares what Luxemburg thought? I don't know. I don't care. The thing is that when you're a bloody slave, you are not physically able to go and have rallies and talk to people because you need your master's permission to leave. And there were 100 million bloody slaves. So you have to have a vanguard who were not bloody slaves, who could get on a train without a note from their owner, who were, so logistically speaking, in Tsarist Russia, how the bleep are these slaves supposed to travel and do things themselves? That is stupid. That's why Chomsky really, really sucks. Oh my God. He called Lenin, my funniest is when he called Lenin a right-wing deviation. And I'm like, you don't know what a right-wing deviation is, dude. Okay. So a right-wing deviation is when you're behind the people. So in America, the people are ready for Medicare for all. But the Democratic Party is like, let's try affordable access to public health. So the Democratic Party is a right-wing deviation because they're not with the people, they are behind the people. A left-wing deviation is when you're kind of a little ahead of the people and you're like what do you call a revolutionary adventurist. Occupy Wall Street is a great example of left-wing deviation because I don't know what they were doing actually. I guess they wanted like a new system, but they thought they could pray it into existence. But they're both errors. You can't be behind the people. You can't be ahead of the people. You have to be with the people if you want to be a dictatorship of the proletariat. Okay. I should read what AOList Drift. Do you know what piece of Rosa Luxemburg's you're talking about? Or Chomsky was talking about? I have 100% think that Chomsky pretended to read State and Revolution and has never actually read State and Revolution, because I've said this on TikTok before, because it sounds really sexy and it sounds like, oh my God, it's about a state and how we're gonna do a revolution. And then when you read it, you realize it's about, I hate Karl Kautsky and he's a stupid idiot and Kautsky deserves to have Rotten Tomatoes thrown on him. So Chomsky thought that Lenin had anarchist leanings in State and Revolution, and it's like, tell me you know nothing about Lenin without actually telling me you know nothing about Lenin. Lenin really hated anarchists. In fact, picking up ladies like Obama, huh? What? I don't understand. Okay, never mind. I'll figure this out. Obama allegedly read Marx to pick up ladies. Okay. Sure, whatever. Yeah. Okay. He was doing something very strange. Okay, there's like a lot of strange things about Obama. One thing that's extremely strange is that he shows up in Chicago to be a community organizer in 1992. He graduates from college in 1983, and he works for some strange company where he does something in East Germany. I'm not saying that he was a CIA agent, but his mom was an anthropologist in Indonesia, and she married one of Suharto's leading people. I'm not saying his mom was a CIA agent because I don't have proof of that. But anthropology is one of the great. Oh, by the way, his dad was also the one who died in a car crash. His real dad. He was also a bourgeoisie from Kenya who came to America on a State Department scholarship. I'm not saying that his real dad was a CIA agent either, but yeah. Anyways, I don't have proof, so I don't say things without proof. I just speculate wildly, like I do now. But of course, we don't have proof, so we can't actually. This is actually a Lenin trick I learned. Lenin's like, Kautsky looks like a cow, but we can't really. He's like, but no, Lenin always does this. He's like, I would normally say that Kautsky looks like a cow, but since we are good Bolsheviks and we don't descend to such that level, I will not say that. But he's written this, and so he's actually saying that Kautsky looks like a cow. No. He said Kautsky. No, what was it? Something about Google proletarian revolution and the renegade Kautsky, because he says something about Kautsky being a cow and chewing cud or something like that. I forgot what. Okay. The real question is, how did Pete Buttigieg happen? I have read his memoir. He went to this like Henry Kissinger Neocon Institute in Harvard and studied international relations. So that's how he happened. Mr. Piece of Work says, you are making me cry. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Anyways, so with that, let's see. I will do some impromptu streams randomly whenever I get pissed at something somebody wrote on the internet. And if anyone, by the way, if you catch any bread tuber, my colleague said his father worked for CSIS, but he would not talk except for about the dangers of microwave. Sure. Yeah. Okay. That is possible. I mean, yeah. What am I thinking? Oh, yeah. If you see any bread tubers talk or any TYT adjacent people talking about what is good strategy and what is not good strategy, please bring that to my attention. And the best way to do it is giving me a timestamp. And then I will smack them down, because they don't know shit about what is good strategy and what is bad strategy. And anyone who does that, like, okay, it is wrong. I'm just, especially if they haven't like overthrown capitalism yet, they're wrong. So I know, whatever. If you're like stumble upon a tweet where somebody says something stupid about strategy or whatever, just bring it to my attention, because I'm gonna get cracking on them. Yeah, because it's like, I'm really like, you don't know, like anyone who says what's good strategy, what's bad strategy is really stupid. How did Pete Buttigieg become such a loser? Good question. How did Kamala Harris become such a loser? Her dad was really cool too. I don't know either. I am always surprised by that, but sometimes it works the other way. For example, Herman Goring's brother, Albert Goring, he was a really good guy, and he secretly smuggled so many like Jews out of Nazi Germany. So it is possible to have the other way too. So you never know. Let's see. Pete's dad translated Gramsci into cops' kids commits the most crimes. Often, yeah. Or sometimes they look at all the evil that their dad's done and they become a revolutionary. Like, it can turn both ways. You never know. I've always wondered why Pete is such a douchebag. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah. Thank you again. Anne Rand. Okay. I have the Soviets were clearly not authoritarian enough if they let her escape. Seriously, when did she come? 1926. Yeah, clearly not enough authoritarianism. They needed to be much more authoritarian and cracking down. Oh no. Okay. Yeah, they let her just escape. Oh, okay. Let me figure out what her real name is. Okay. It is Alisa Zinovievna Rosenbaum. Oh, and libertarians are so anti-Semitic that she had to pretend not to be Jewish, if that's the case. Yeah, that's what happened. Oh my God, what a bitch. And so she, like back then, libertarians were like total Nazis. My God. Yeah. Cool. Oh my God. She was on amphetamines when she was writing Atlas Shrugged. That's so funny. This is all on her. Oh my God. Yeah. More authoritarianism is needed. Yeah. The one thing you'll be so surprised is how merciful everyone on every communist is. Yeah. Because you'll then realize what these fucking fascists, like bloody fascists did. I should be careful about my swearing. Okay. What these bleeping fascists did. And then you'll realize, oh my God, you like hung children up from meat hooks and they only gave you 2 years in prison and made you read like some Lenin books for that. So, and then you're like, okay, you bleeping snowflake, shut the bleep up. Like you will, okay. So basically, yeah, so like you'll be surprised over and over how overly merciful everyone on like Fidel Castro even in like 1985 was speaking about like he's like, yeah, I know I have these like total horrible war criminals in prison, but I have kept them in prison for like 30 years. I want to release them, but I don't know if I can get the public to accept that. Maybe if like they were to leave to go to Europe or something, like, and then you're like, then you realize, wait a minute, these people murdered 200 people. You'd never get out in America. And like Fidel Castro is thinking about, he wanted to release no, there were 200 war criminals, and he wanted to release 70 of them, just like because it had been 30 years and he thought it was too long. And I'm like, what? Are you nuts? And then there's Hugo Chavez's bleeping mass amnesty. He kept on giving these like right-wing nut jobs because he believed in the Catholic concept of forgiveness. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm like, yeah. So Hugo Chavez grew up in like a very religious Catholic household, and he really believed in the Jesus idea of forgiving your enemy and hugging it out. And then he released like Leopoldo Lopez and all of them from prison. And I'm like, what the bleep is wrong with you? Yeah. That's like, what? No. You need to like, there's only like, as I said, yeah. And whoever says as communists, we believe in community, and yeah, you do. Unfortunately, that's like the, no, you exactly. So that's like, you'll see all communists are way too forgiving. No question about it. Like all of them, 100% of them. You're like, Jesus. Like when you look at the crimes these people commit, and that's where there's a mismatch, because it's easier to believe that you got 2 years for writing some mean thing about Lenin than believing that you got 2 years for exterminating entire villages. Yeah, all landlords must. That's not a bad idea. Yeah, it's like, I don't know how to explain it, but there's this. That's what makes the propaganda so insidious, because it's hard to believe how merciful these people were, and also people don't have the context. So like if you kind of understand, okay, so when you're reading Alexander Santism, I forget how to pronounce his last name. Okay, let me figure out how to pronounce his last name. I will forget it again, but yesterday it was some dude asked us to like put some Alex on audiobooks. And then when I looked at that book, he was like, that book was like counting all the Jews. It's Solzhenitsyn. Okay. Alexander Isayevich Solzhenitsyn. Okay. That's Solzhenitsyn. Okay. I'll just call him the anti-Semitic snowflake. Yeah, yesterday, this guy wanted us to translate, do an audiobook. And then I looked at the book, and he was like, his complaint about the Bolsheviks was that there was one Georgian, one Russian, one Armenian, and 17 Jews in the cabinet. And I'm like, no, we're not doing an audiobook of that. And that's not a valid complaint to have, that there are too many Jews in your cabinet. Like, what the bleep? He was literally like counting all the Jews in government. And I'm like, yeah. Like, that's literally not A, very anti-Semitic, and B, very creepy, and C, why? And that's obsessive too. Yeah, he was literally like, so he was upset that the Bolsheviks had one Russian, one Georgian, one Armenian, and 17 Jews, even though the Jews are also Russian, Georgian, and Armenian, because Judaism is a religion, but he doesn't think they're people. So I think that's kind of how you get the one Russian, one Georgian, one Armenian, and 17 Jews. Oh, and then some Mohammedans, and it's like, shut up, you anti-Semitic racist snowflake. Yeah. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this stream. We'll be back next week with another edition of Late Nights with Lenin. And like, I kind of eventually want to make it funny enough to be like a good alternative to Saturday Night Live. That's just a dream, I've whispered. Okay. Anyways, with that, I will say auf Wiedersehen. Please like, subscribe, ring the bell, and something else. Go to historically.substack.com/subscribe and become a paid subscriber. And with that, I will say auf Wiedersehen, and I will have to figure out a new greeting to say goodbye. But auf Wiedersehen.